Joining. Thanks for being here. It's crazy times. Let's come in. Let's talk. Glad you're here. How you feeling? I have an inner rage inside me. Annette, I have WhatsApp open if you need me. Trying to figure out what to do with that inner rage, right? Let's work on it together. Have a couple things we want to talk about today. We're going to talk about Kaitlan Collins, her experience with Donald Trump yesterday, why there is a slow to no response from MAGA Christians on the release of the files, as well as I'm going to answer a question or two. Hi, Heather. It's good to see you. Always good to see you here. You are welcome anytime, my dear, anytime. I'm going to see if I can pop out. Let's see what I can do here. Give me just a second here. I'm still trying to get used to this. Can you please talk about faith when the world is burning? I want to have faith, but I have more fury. User 736, yeah, I think a lot of us are feeling the same kind of way you are right now. And faith has a lot of meaning and a lot of layers to it. So this is our time to turn whatever this inner toil is and turn it into action. It's almost like the crisis that we're in. It has a sense of urgency to it that the powers that be, their intention is to paralyze us into non-action. And they're hoping that our indoctrination, for many of us, which is evangelical, some kind of Americanized version of Christianity, paralyzes us into inaction. And I think if we can focus on some kind of action and frame it as sacred activism, understand that action now is sacred, action now is holy resistance, that maybe we do have to pause some of that work that we're feeling, that inner turmoil that says, well, what is it I believe? I mean, we're seeing our whole lives imploding, and especially some of the foundational things that we felt that we had safety in, that we could count on, that we could rely on as like our systems of government, the things that protected us, that those would be fail-proof systems that ensured that nothing could implode it, which is not what's happening. That's not the reality. So that fragments us emotionally, spiritually, mentally, and it's all intentional. So are we going to, it doesn't mean that your feelings aren't valid. It doesn't mean that at all. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that maybe the conversation that can help our challenges with faith are more about what can we do? What are some of the things that we can do, because the intention is to gaslight us into thinking there's nothing we can do. So I think that's where I would like to have the conversation. It's not that, I've spoken a lot about how I even think that what's happened over the past 10 or 12 years has certainly impacted how I see my religious heritage. Probably has impacted a lot about why I finally now say I'm no longer a Christian. But in reality, though, my faith has strengthened because I've reimagined, redefined it. I no longer am beholden to this anthropomorphized patriarchal God that I desperately sought approval of by trying to be a good Christian, and then more see it linked to my humanity, how I show up in the world, leaving a legacy of kindness. that my spirituality is no longer not contingent upon this patriarchal God's approval, and more about what are we doing to elevate the human conscience into a higher level of compassion. I mean, we may be taking the long way home, but that's where humanity has always been going. So what is our contributions to it? And what if that is our spirituality? So that might be a longer response than what you wanted. What I'm trying to figure out here is how to pop out my chat so I can see it. I might have just found it. And they keep changing things every time I get in here, so oops, let me make sure my phone's on silent. It does not. It means I will be getting. Thank you, user 736. I'm glad it was helpful. So I have a couple of topics I want to talk about. I did post earlier just a little blurb about the incident that happened with Kaitlan Collins, because I do think that has a teaching moment about white Christian patriarchy. I also want to talk about how the MAGA Christians' slow or non-response to the release of especially this last batch of files, what that has to do with the time that we're in and understanding what that is. Because any of us who are deconstructing, who've left Christianity altogether, who are seeking a spiritual but not religious path, there's teaching elements here. There's elements of your indoctrination hiding inside you. And you may be triggered by some of this and not even understand that that's what's happening. Then we'll answer a question or two. B, you good over there? That's my son. I don't know what he's doing. Heather says, I'm at a loss about my faith journey just now due to things that have happened, been said, etc. I'm sorry, Heather. Well, I hope your time with us will help today in some way. Hey, Moon Sky, thanks for being here. What did I just see? Winky Dinky, I'm not surprised at all about who's going to end up being in those files. It's been interesting about how these files have been redacted. It's incredibly haphazardly. It seems intentional, but also just outrageous, especially with the names of the victims. And I think what else? And then the narratives that are trying to be around it, which also goes back to the Kaitlan Collins incident yesterday in the Oval Office. So if you're ready, let's just dive into it. You can drop some questions in the comments. Everybody, I'm being heard okay? Everything's good? Okay. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Rev Karla. I used to be a Christian. I'm an interfaith. I'm an ordained interfaith interspiritual minister. For those of you who don't know what an interfaith minister is, that is a minister who explores world religions and has a respect for them, and understands that at their core, their initial founding, if you will, there was a desire to answer the question about who we are in relationship to a God that we may be seeking, however that is defined. Interspiritual says that spirituality can and does exist outside of organized religion. So that was really important for me in my deconstructing journey, to be able to be at a place where I can help people deconstruct from Christianity and also help them with their spiritual path and heal from their experience inside Christian patriarchy. So that's what we do here. And I try to come on here to come live when I can. It's not as often as what I would like, but I do try to come here. Hi, Madeline. It's good to see you. Thank you, Haphazard. So I'm going to start with the Kaitlan Collins situation, since that happened yesterday. And if you don't know what happened, there are videos out there. The press is in the Oval Office. I don't even know what executive order he's called everybody in to sign. He's sitting at the desk. She asks him about the Epstein files, and he immediately goes into this thing about, well, thank God they exonerated me, which they don't. Even with this last millions of pages, they don't do that. But that's the gaslighting that goes on inside these narratives, and how you are supposed to gobble down everything I'm saying, just like you are supposed to do when you're sitting in the pulpit and you're being spoon-fed from the pulpit. Everything that Trump does relies on this Christian patriarchal indoctrination that's supposed to trigger that response in you that if I said it, then it's true. If I said it, then it's true. And I say that there's nothing in that file, nothing in those files that accuse me of anything. I'm blameless. It was nothing but a witch hunt by JE and the Democrats. So this is the bold statement that he makes inside this press conference when Kaitlan Collins is asking him about it. She continues to press him on this, and he immediately starts to attack her. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So what he's doing there is following the oldest script inside American Christianity, because that's the foundation, that's the framework upon which our country began. The nation, United States of America, began under this white Christian patriarchy. And we've talked before about manifest destiny, about the push westward, and how that was divinely ordered, that the white man had the right to go forward, dominating everything, and dominion theology, which said that Christianity would be the primary religion that they would take forward. So using all of this theology and basing it in a contortion of scripture, they use this narrative to create this framework upon which our government structure is built. Which is, if you think about that, immediately you can understand why the system has always been so challenging to create any type of equity or equality, because it's designed, it's in it and of itself is designed to protect the white Christian man, to stay in power, to remain in power. I'm not I'll get back through some of the comments, but Lynette, let me know if there's anything I need to pay attention to right off the bat. So I'm keeping an eye on my teaching notes right now, but I'll get back to the comments in a minute. So that's the system it's been designed to protect. And what that has always done has treated women, your credibility and your worth is always conditional upon your loyalty to and your submission and your obedience to patriarchy. So it's never assumed that women earn that power. It's always about how loyal we are to the patriarchal structure, and then we are rewarded with power. Immediately think of, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Kristi Noem. Those names will come to mind right now. But this has impacted white women for years. Now, when I talk about how we have to look at how we've been negatively impacted by white Christian patriarchy, we also have to look at how it benefits us. Because you have to look at it you have to look at both sides of the coin, because if we're loyal to it, then we're going to be elevated by it. And again, look at the names in power right now, but also just throughout history, how that's happened. So Trump fixates on, immediately targets Kaitlan Collins when she pushes back that he says, I'm exonerated, and she says, well, what about the victim? So she kind of bypasses the fact that he's saying, I'm blameless, that I'm not even in the files, which isn't true. He's named thousands of times. But he immediately fixates on her smile. So he completely ignores the question about the victims. That's not important in his mind, because Christian patriarchy can never acknowledge the suffering of victims that have been harmed by the system. If you do, that weakens the system. You can't acknowledge failure. You can't acknowledge a fault line within the system, because you will then somehow, you're creating some kind of narrative that confirms that someone was right, that there's a weakening in it that deserves to be acknowledged. You cannot do that. So that's exactly what Trump is doing. Trump's a master at this. So if you want to talk about Trump being good at anything, it's good at weaponizing power. He knows how to do it. And he did that. That's why the marriage of Trump to evangelical Christianity, or MAGA Christianity, whatever you want to call it. I'm freezing, Dub Views. Hi, Dub Views. Oh, freezing. Okay, sorry. I saw your comment on YT. I thought you were talking about my video was freezing. That's why I shouldn't look at comments when I'm deep into my teaching notes. But him zeroing in on her smile is a reminder that patriarchy believes that a woman's looks, primarily her face, exists for man's comfort. If you go back and look at the video and what he says, I don't know how to play a video during a live stream, or I would do that now. He says, I've known her for 10 years, this young woman, he has to say. So he says something about her age, and as if to demean the fact that she's young and that she hasn't smiled in 10 years. I've never seen her smile once. Again, get this. Kaitlan Collins is asking about the victims named in the files, and he turns it on her smile, says she's a horrible reporter, and turns it about her smile. And this is an effective diversion tactic. It's certainly in the past. Kaitlan wasn't having it in the moment, because what that does is, that is a code for anybody else in the proximity, but also the person that they're talking to, that is a command for submission. It certainly is a shot across the bow, proverbial dog whistle, whatever you want to call it, but that is about saying that whatever is coming out of your mouth doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what credentials you have. I don't care how courageous you think you are. I'm about to put you in your place. So he calls her the worst reporter, and then he attempts to suffocate the truth, because he says, he reframes the accountability, first of all saying that he's not in the files, and then he says, this is about you being a bad reporter who never smiles. That's the most important moment in this situation right now, is the fact that you are a horrible reporter and you never smile. Then she pushes back and says, and he's talking over her, but if you go back and listen to the video, she says, I am asking you about the victims of JE. I'm asking you about the victims. So in other words, what she's not saying there is, why in the world would you expect me to smile when I'm talking about victims of abuse? Why in the world would you expect me to smile about that? And he continues to interrupt her and says that the reason you don't smile is because you know you're not telling the truth. You might think that this has to do with Donald Trump. Y'all, this has everything to do with white Christian patriarchy. You think that this is outrageous because the President of the United States says it. Every woman, I shouldn't say every, but many women right now, they probably have, if they're not typing it now, they will when this gets clipped and posted as a video, will start telling their story about being in a church where a Christian leader said something as outrageous and insulting and degrading and dehumanizing as this to a woman who dared challenge, who dared push back, who dared tell the truth, and then were completely disrespected because at that point she became a threat to the system that man is hell-bent on protecting and perpetuating because they benefit from it so greatly, financially and through power. And there's no doubt that Trump's lust for power is motivating all of this, but this happens in church every Sunday, in the elders' rooms, in the deacons' meetings, in the ladies' breakfast, Sunday brunch, wherever it is. This is happening on and on and on because the woman who dares to challenge this system is seen as a threat, and it's better to completely call her out and cast her out if she cannot be controlled, because she is a threat to the system that they're benefiting from. So the accusation that she doesn't tell the truth because she doesn't smile reveals how patriarchy defines truth as compliance. So in other words, you don't get to say what the facts are. You have to say what the truth is based on the narrative that leadership gives you. So as painful as it might be for some of you to do so, as part of your deconstruction, as part of your empowerment, watch as much of these press briefings as you can to hear the difference between someone like Kaitlan Collins. Now, I will be the first to admit that I've been very negative and critical of organizations like CNN and many of the other organizations because they're bending the knee. And I don't know to what degree this is going to end, because we also know that the White House is actively removing news agencies that don't align with them. So if that's the case, at what benefit is it to their news organization if they lose access to the White House? So I don't know what kind of act of solidarity it is at this moment where we are in authoritarianism, at what point the news agencies unite in some kind of act of solidarity to say, if you're going to say these things, then we're going to do X, Y, Z. I don't know. I'm not a journalist, and I don't know enough about that. But I'm saying in this moment, in this specific incident, Kaitlan Collins not only said the right thing, and then she pushed back with the right thing, is the kind of journalism that I think we need to continue to see. How she'll be punished remains to be seen. If she will inside the White House, I don't know. I don't understand a lot of that. But my point there is that we have to continue to put pressure on some of these news organizations for the type of accountability that we want them to have when they have access to some of these politicians. Ask the hard questions. Another case in point. If you had listened to the 2-hour press conference when Trump surprised the press room by coming in during his anniversary of his first year in office, they did nothing but throw him softball questions for 2 solid hours. It was I was so disgusted. And yes, I listened to the whole thing. And I know for many of you, it's very hard to listen to him. It's hard to listen to the lies. It's hard to listen to the gaslighting. I don't know what changed in me over the past, 9 months or so, but all of a sudden I can listen to him. All of a sudden, there's an inner rage inside me that just says, bring it. I'm going to listen to everything that comes out of your mouth, you mother, and I'm going to toss back facts. Your lies are going to empower me and make me a better teacher. Your lies and your gaslighting, I'm going to be the beacon of truth and light to somebody out there who needs to hear and be reminded that we are still the majority. The power still lies with the people here, folks. It ain't over yet. Do we have a long way to go? And is it really bad right now? It is, but it ain't over. They're the ones who are working as fast as they can because they are terrified that we are very, very close to collective resistance and massive civil disobedience. And I just posted a video called Video 1 of Sacred Activism. It's a 6-part series where I'm going through a couple of things that I've learned from Dr. Cornel West, Scott Galloway, who just created a website called Resist and Unsubscribe. You'll find information in that video. And also from Timothy Snyder, we're talking about there's other things that can be done that fit into the vision of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. of nonviolent resistance. And that massive upheaval can happen. And that's not saying, yes, protest. Yes, call your legislators. Yes, vote. But there's much more actionable steps than you can take. So if you're at a place where you're going from overwhelm that's leading you into paralysis, don't do that. Stay in this space, because these types of communities, even if it's just here in this live or you watching educational, inspirational videos on social media, it's community. Especially, that is so important for those of us who are unchurched, who we don't have that physical, spiritual community anymore. They're relying on us not finding each other. And I also say in that video that I don't know how much more time we have in spaces like this in social media, so we really have to be mindful about using that time strategically. Nobody's giving up here, y'all. Nobody's giving up. Stay with us, keep breathing, but stay here. Okay, that was kind of a side rant. Let me see where we are. I need to get some water anyway. We're here. Thank you, Donna Jean. I'm glad you're here. Yes, Sacred Active video. It took a while to get it up and going, and I hope to now post a video every day that until I get all 6 of those, till I get all 6 of those loaded. What's a weird thing to say? Your favorite bug guy? Are you promoting and vehemently claiming righteousness? You're on the part of, okay, I'm not dealing with anybody. Hey, y'all, if we get trolls in here, just understand that they're just jealous. I can see why. Over on YT, the amount of cowardly behavior by those who have power is ridiculous. They want to continue to use the other to do the deadly work. Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, let's get back to the Kaitlan Collins teaching I have here. I have several other notes I want to go over. This moment with Trump and Kaitlan Collins, it weaponized a familiar historical narrative that strong women who do not bend the knee to white Christian patriarchy are framed as cold, hostile, aggressive, unlikable. So the leadership's competence never has to be addressed. It never has to be addressed. It's always focusing back on the characteristics that they're placing on a courageous woman speaking her mind, especially when she's equipped with facts and knowledge and experience, and she has found her voice. There is nothing more that a man who relies on patriarchy for their power, there's nothing more that a man disdains but also fears than a woman with that type of courage. Nothing more. So Trump's response, it mirrors centuries of power that have protected itself using these types of weapons. So when women ask the questions men don't want to answer, they would reframe those questions as insolence. In my perspective, or in my experience, it was always I had a spirit of offense on me. I don't know how many times I was told that. I had a rudeness problem. I didn't want to submit to authority. I was, just on and on and on it goes. I'm sure many of you have. So it's so condescending for him to say, "You can never smile, Liz." Hi, Liz. It's good to see you. So the public nature of the insult was also the point. If it wasn't just the fact that she said it, he could say it louder. He had the louder microphone, and it was so important for him to sit there at that desk and be able to effuse it like he was some kind of king. The fact that she was, quote, the worst reporter. So this is the way she doesn't know what she did there at that moment, but what she did was also attack patriarchal entitlement, because she asked the question, he thought that he answered it, but she didn't take it. She immediately came back with, "What do you say to the victims of JE?" He did not like that, because what he saw was that was an attack on patriarchal entitlement. I answered your question, that should have been enough. So he immediately came back with an insult. So, okay, I'm going to skip through this. We already talked about the reporters in the room and how that has become this norm, but I've seen several people comment that they're so disappointed in the other reporters in the room, and the only way that's going to change is if we start expecting something differently in those reporters. And because right now many of them are bending the knee, but think about how many people were on that plane when Trump looked at that woman and said, "Quiet, piggy." Nobody said a word. They went right on to the next questions. He said, "Quiet, piggy," and nobody said a word. That's why I said every woman was Kaitlan Collins in that room. We have a moment in our lives where our worth was determined by how we looked rather than our experience, our mind, our passion. When we were told to just shut up and make dinner, shut up and just make babies, shut up and give me your paycheck, shut up and clean the toilets. You fill that in, because there's some moment in your life where you felt that. We all did. If you go back and look if you haven't seen the video, look. Again, for those of you who say it triggers you too much, this is how we become empowered. If you can safely do it, watch the video. Look at the angle where there's a video angle that shows Kaitlan's response, and she's not moving. She's standing firm in her truth, because this is all related right now. That rage you're feeling is aligning you with the ancestors. That rage you're feeling right now is aligning you with the ancestors who fought for women's rights, who fought for women's rights to own property in their own names, to not be committed to a mental institution when their husband wanted to marry someone else, or take possession of her assets that she brought into the marriage. They fought for our rights to not have our children taken away simply because the judge believed in a divorce case that they would be better off with the father. They fought for our right to vote. They fought for a woman's right to only have one option, which was to sleep her way into a boardroom, because our ancestors wanted us to be respected for our minds and our education and our experience and our insight. Our ancestors fought for our rights not to have to resort to backroom alley clinics because we couldn't afford one more mouth to feed, or we wouldn't ever be able to escape an abusive marriage, or for whatever reason that's none of our business because we don't live her life. So it's our time to turn that rage into action. That's why we say, yes, protest, call your legislators, like, share, comment these lives and these videos. Please help us get the word out. For many of us, our content has been not seen. And I don't say this to be melodramatic, but I don't know how much longer we're going to have safely on some of these platforms, because it's very obvious what's happening. But also continue to participate in boycotts. And like I shared, I have some information in the first video that I destroyed, but turning that inner rage into activism is so, so important, because it's also about boycotting corporations that do not care about you. And that website I mentioned, Resist and Unsubscribe, has information about how to resist and unsubscribe from many of those corporations that have spent way too much time in the Oval Office. And so there's much more that we can do during this time of collective uprising. We're finding each other, and many, many people are finding their voice and their courage. So let's continue to do that. Okay, I'm going to stop here for a minute. Turn the rage into activism. That's right. Yes, the first video is up. Thank you, Marilyn. I'm glad you're here. I'm just going to take a break a minute. See. Dobbs on YT says both of my grandpas fought in World War II. They are both turning in their graves, I'm sure. Let's see what I've missed. Yeah, Plumbing Bird, I hear you. With all the gentleness I can muster, if you can't watch that clip, we need you to grow a pair. I agree with you that I will never minimize someone's experience, someone's life story, someone's trauma that prevents them from seeing things, especially when it comes around abuse of children, SA, anything like that. But we are missing a vital, vital part if we're not able to sit in a moment of uncomfortable and another's suffering. If it helps us to stay informed in some way, then we must find ways to do it, even if we find it uncomfortable. Now, for the longest time, for whatever reason, I couldn't watch him live, so I would watch it recording. But now it's gloves off. I'm watching. I'm taking notes. I'm like, oh well, that's a lie. I'll be using that for my next video. I'll use it to my good. Okay. CJ says rage can have powerful and mobilizing effects. Channel the anger into activism. Yes, Coach Joe says Trump is teaching our children that it is normal to be rude and condescending. Absolutely. Heather says, I feel like I don't have a voice and scared to speak up about what's happened to me. Heather, just continue to be in these spaces. This is where we learn, and we, as flowery as it sounds, we kind of learn and grow together. So I think that's part of what the deconstructing spaces are about. This is a good point, Giorgio. Am I saying your name right? The media is getting, just like the Democrats, it's becoming too difficult for them to take any action. Yeah, I think I join. Hi, Lady K. I join the growing chorus of people who are frustrated with Democrats right now. I did hear somebody the other day say that they're acting more like they're just waiting until it's their turn to be in power, and so they seem to be playing this game, which is built upon that classist patriarchal structure upon which this entire system has been built since the beginning of the founding of this country, and not necessarily being the radicalized voice that we need right now. I mean, we need some really, really outrageous thoughts, outrageous actions. We have to be able to be as bold. The pushback has to be just as bold. The pushback has to feel just as audacious as anything that we have seen. If we're really fighting for the rights of humanity, if we're really fighting for human rights, then that's what it has to be about. And we're not quite seeing that yet. I mean, obviously we have some outliers. Even, like Jasmine is very loud. AOC is very loud. There's some, but when you talk about the Democratic leaders, I don't know. I'm not seeing it. Yeah, Finnegan, that's a good point. That's a good way to say it. I'm desensitized with words from governing people. Yeah, if I see one more person talking about how we're going to have more conversations or things like that, I just don't know. I'm really, really concerned that we won't even have the midterms. I'm really concerned we're not going to have them. I think a lot of what's happening right now is to justify him suspending them. I mean, you got to see how serious what he just called for when he wants to nationalize voting, which is certainly something that Viktor Orban, it's a tactic of authoritarianism to do so. It's right out of the Putin playbook. In reality, one of the most independent, protected rights are for each state to run their election and to protect those elections as they see fit. And time again, and has proven to be safe and effective. That part of our electoral cycle has worked. And as no matter how many times they call for the votes being rigged and how they're unfair, it's not. That's not the reality. Yeah, Dobuse thinks we will have the midterms, but removing them from voter rolls and passports are already showing up as being canceled with no warning. Yeah, continue to follow your voter registration to make sure you're valid, for sure. Thank you, TK. Did you grab Matt? Letting illegals vote. Anybody who uses the phrase illegals, you immediately know they have to be blocked. Okay, now I'm ready to move on to the next topic. I prepared a teaching material called Where's the Christian Outrage? And this is related to the lack of response or no response from MAGA Christians related to the release of the files. People keep asking that question, and I got answers for you. Would you like to go there? You want to talk about this? Trigger warning. Thank you, Alex. I appreciate that. Yes, like and share. Like and share. I appreciate that. Really do. Because I don't understand a lot about this, but I know that helps. Really appreciate it. Thank you for the follows too. I see some of you doing that here. I appreciate it. Also, don't forget that you can find me over on other platforms, including Substack, where I write regularly. I'll also be starting a book club around my book called Deconstructing. You can get a signed copy in the TikTok shop, and you can get it where all books are sold. We're going to be doing some study together around that. Yes, fellow writer, indeed. Writing is still my safe space. I haven't seen, I said, where's the Christian outrage related to the JE files? Y'all want to talk about that? Thank you for the shares. You want to hear about this? If not, I'll save it for a video, but I'm also prepared to talk about that if you'd like me to go over these notes. 1 yes is all I need. 2 yeses, you got it. Let's do it. All right, I am going to give a trigger warning on this. We are going to talk about abuse, because obviously if we're going to talk about the files, I'm not going to go into specific details. Thank you, Views. You got it. But it can be triggering, so just take care as we go through this together. Take a breath and take a step away if you need to. The short answer is, where's the Christian outrage? It's primarily non-existent because we were indoctrinated to believe that we never, ever had the right to demand accountability from our leaders. And that is impacting how many of the Christians are responding to the release of the files. Because after this last batch, there is no more speculating about how horrific they are. And sadly, we also now know more of the names of the victims. We also know so many more names of the alleged abusers. And the response from the MAGA Christians has been almost non-existent, very muted, if anything, and very evasive. And then you have things like Trump getting up there and saying, well, it basically exonerated me. And it doesn't. But that's the kind of gaslighting that we just talked about. But it mirrors exactly what happens when abuse is exposed inside Christian institutions, especially when the accused is one of the leaders. This happens over and over again. And I want to go back in history because I love to take you back to a situation and build a bridge. So when I started thinking about what I was going to teach, the first thing I thought about was 2022, Warsaw, Indiana. Now, y'all are going to remember this. Warsaw, Indiana, 2022. The pastor is John Lowe. You can still find the videos out there. He got up in front of his congregation and he confessed to adultery. Now remember, he used the word adultery. So he confessed to adultery, and it was years ago, so it was a long time ago, but he felt at this moment he needed to get up and confess to adultery. And what he was doing was asking his congregation for forgiveness. Now, what he didn't know was that the woman with whom he had what he called an affair came forward. He did not know she was going to be in the audience that day. She came forward with her husband, and her husband took the mic from the pastor and said, "Let her speak." And here's what she said. "It was not an affair. Our relationship began when I was 16. She was 16, and she tells the story of it actually, him preparing her, the word I can't use, on social media before that. And she said, I'm going to make one thing clear here. You are not the victim. So now I want you to park this situation here, because as soon as she got this out, she leaves the stage. People start peppering him with questions, saying, is this true? And he said he had to admit it was. And that she was that age. So this is not just a Catholic Church problem. This is a white Christian patriarchy problem. And any church that weaponizes Scripture to indoctrinate people to silence and submission through fear-based theology tactics are especially vulnerable to this. So if you go back and listen to what I just said, any church that weaponizes Scripture to indoctrinate people to silence and submission through fear-based theology tactics are especially vulnerable to this. That's broadly your evangelical community, evangelical Christian community. That's where you're vastly going to find MAGA Christians. But that isn't to say that that's just an evangelical problem. This can happen in progressive churches as well, and it does happen. But the silence coming from MAGA Christians right now related to the release of these files is deafening. And this is how white Christian patriarchy works. And I'm just going to say, I'm going to get through this, but I don't want any of you to think for 1 minute that anything I say is to excuse the behavior or lack of response from MAGA Christians. It is not. I am simply getting ready to explain to you the indoctrination tactics and why they very much are cult-like to hold people into submission, but I am not excusing their behavior whatsoever. But what white Christian patriarchy does is it minimizes harm done. It minimizes harm of the abuser by reframing the situation. Just think back to Pastor John Lowe, the story I just shared. He said he had an affair, when in reality, he was abusing a child. And this system protects men in power by reframing that abuse as a sin. The pastor got up and admitted to a sin instead of the violence that he had caused a child. He was asking for forgiveness for his affair instead of admitting that he was a predator. Now, let's stay in 2022 for a minute and think what else happened in 2022. Well, if you don't remember, I'll refresh your memory. The Southern Baptist Convention, the largest Christian denomination in America, decides to release a database containing hundreds of names of abusers within their church. And they did so under pressure. Hundreds of names. You could still go out and find the database. It's still there. They framed this, they patted themselves on the back. They framed it as accountability, and that from now on they were going to be very transparent. They were ready to take action on the abuse inside their congregations. They also committed to keeping this database updated, because one of the tactics that is used inside these denominations is a lot of church hopping. So if you have a pastor who has been abusive in one church, what do? You move him to another community. It's all about the effectiveness of the dollar. If this pastor is effectively bringing people in to the pews and he's getting them to tithe then that value is prioritized over the well-being of any victims. So if you can remove him, pluck him from that situation and put him someplace else until he does it again, and you just keep repeating the cycle. So last year, the effort to transparency and keeping the database, so they had just in 2022, they said, we're going to keep this updated. In 25, they quietly abandoned the database without one time, not one time updating it, not once. And they just completely abandoned it. Now, the original database is out there, but it has not been updated in any way, shape, or form. So the list of abusers may be there, but you have no idea where these people are. What's happening? Where'd they go? Were they charged? Nothing. It would take effort on people trying to find out that information outside the congregation. Yeah, good luck with that. These churches are shut down. That is one thing they know how to do better than, besides just also keeping their finances under the radar, they know how to keep their abusers out of the limelight. So, once again, the abusers are elevated to a higher priority than the victims, and the victims are silenced. So what that tells the victims is they hear this loud and clear that their silence is a mandate for compliance. And a lot of times, especially if these victims are children, they have no choice but to remain in the system because their parents don't see, who have been indoctrinated into this for so long, don't see this as the deal breaker to leave church. Not always, but sometimes. We are talking about the most extremist of MAGA Christians. But in order for them to remain in community, the family itself, including the victim, they understand what they've signed up for. They understand that they must protect the institution, protect the leader, delay accountability, agree with delaying accountability, reframe who is the victim, and then just bide your time as everything just kind of dies down. So what white Christian patriarchy does, it conditions people to see Christian leaders as God's chosen. So what this framing does, it creates this fear. You're afraid to question their authority or their decisions. You fear speaking up for retribution. You've seen what's happened to other people. And you fear being seen as rebellious, divisive, or sinful for demanding any kind of accountability or answers to your questions. So when leaders are treated as divine representatives, accountability becomes framed as an attack on God instead of a demand for justice. And that conditioning, it not only silences the victims, it trains everyone. It trains everyone that silence is next to godliness. That's what it trains you to do. So this is why what is revealed in those files matters in this conversation. In their mind, it doesn't matter. It's powerful men. And you get Trump up there every time these files come up saying they're not important. I've been exonerated. Something else he said, I'm just being reminded during the Kaitlan Collins exchange, he said, well, if this were true, I'm paraphrasing, but he basically said if this were true, everything would be blowing up right now. If it was true that these people were named and it was true that it would be blowing up. Do you see how he's dismissing and reframing the narrative? Those are all dog whistles to MAGA Christians. Don't blow this up. It's not your place to. You're not in power here. Remember who the power is. You've been indoctrinated into institutional silence. Do not challenge my authority here, because you'll be the one left out in the cold. These are all triggering memories inside the indoctrinated MAGA Christian of the threat of rejection, or worse, the fear of hell. So, as sad as it is, the priority, the care, the concern for the survivors never make it to the table. It never makes it to the table. They haven't even gone so far as to think about empathy. They're only thinking about what's the retribution if I speak up or question. MAGA Christians know how horrific these files are, because many of them are victims themselves. You got to go back to that database from the Southern Baptist Convention and just say, that's one denomination. Do you know how extensive and pervasive abuse of women and children are inside the American Christian church right now? And how it's underreported and the victims are silenced through coercion, through indoctrination. The MAGA Christians know because they've experienced it. They know. But the system they are loyal to has taught them that exposing powerful men threatens the structure itself. And in their mind, weakening that structure weakens God. And their proximity to their community, their own salvation, are interwoven into that narrative, and they simply cannot untether from it. They are terrified. Now remember what I said, I am not excusing their behavior. I'm simply telling you about this indoctrination. So when people tell you that it's cult-like, it absolutely is. Can you untether from it, and can you release from that indoctrination? Yes, you can. Does it take work? Yes. Is it worth it? Yes. Are they choosing not to? Yes. Because somehow, somewhere, they're either terrified or they're benefiting from it. Either way, it's insidious. So this is not to excuse them at all. Their lack of compassion and moral compass are a reflection of their willingness to stay true to a system that they know creates so much pain and suffering, and they do not care. Because within Christian patriarchy, maintaining authority is treated as more sacred than protecting children. Stability is valued over truth. Order is valued over justice. Survivors are expected to be silenced and carry the cost of that experience. Somehow, it's their fault. Abusers are not only excused from using the language, they're taught to use the language that softens their actions. That is why abuse persists across churches, no matter the denomination and no matter what year it is. It's the same as it was 100 years ago. Not because Christians don't know better, but because the system has trained them to look away, and that system is pervasive in 2026. Now, I said park that story about Pastor John Lowe from Warsaw, Indiana, because I want to come back to that for a minute. Based on everything I just told you, at the very end of that video, go watch it. Because at the very end of that video, the congregation en masse goes forward to pray with the pastor. They're going to pray with the pastor that they just learned that he lied about an affair that was an abuse of a child, while that woman and her husband stood in the corner with one or two people as they hugged her. That was in 2022. And here we are in 26 dealing with the same kind of cult-like indoctrination that always protects the abuser. So until Christian communities dismantle the belief that men leaders are above scrutiny, this cycle will continue. It will allow Trump to sit in the Oval Office and say he's exonerated in files that name him thousands of times and say some of the most horrific, terrifying things that he allegedly has done to children. It doesn't matter if they're just different names for the churches, it's different denominations, but it's the same outcomes. The question is not whether these abuses are connected. They absolutely are. The question is whether people are willing to confront the system that keeps producing them. Protecting the vulnerable should never be optional. If a faith structure consistently fails to do that, the problem isn't, quote, sin. That's just a scapegoat. The problem is the system itself that is designed to perpetuate the perpetuation of that system over all else. I misread that. I want to do it again. The problem is the system that itself designed to protect the perpetuation of that system over all else, including the well-being of children. And I'm going to remind you, turn your inner rage into activism. Be sure to watch my Sacred Activism series. I just posted video 1, where the information is going to be about mass civil disobedience, nonviolent resistance, and initiatives for boycotting corporations who do not care about you. The first video is up. You can immediately go to resist and unsubscribe to find out where you can unsubscribe from some of these corporations. You can also join my Substack, where I write and teach, and we are creating community there, including going to be teaching from my book soon on deconstructing, leaving church, finding faith. I'm going to take a break, and I've got one more section I'm going to go over with you. How we doing? How was that? Was that helpful? Thank you all for the likes, the shares, the gifts. I so appreciate. I'm not ignoring any of that. I'm not the most astute, engaged, aware content creator. I just love to teach. Where am I reading from? I'm reading from my notes. I'm reading from my teaching notes. It's all me. Session Shredder. Does that help? Thank you, Shelley. You're doing fabulous. Thank you, Valerie. I appreciate you. So what I'm reading from are actually they're my video. Thank you, Session. Session Shredder, these will become, I'll do something with them probably on Substack. I'll probably make them into a blog, or I'll do something with them so you have them in written form in some way. What will also, this entire live will be uploaded to Lynette. Where will they be uploaded? Women are going to be the ones with the hardest to do. Yes, 100%. Tube of You and Substack. Yes, so that's where the entire live will be. We'll also be clipping from this and trying to get this information out to you as best we can. I'm really empowered right now. I'm trying to turn my rage into action. Now, as I was writing this about where is the Christian outrage, I want to go back to that. I'm sorry. I probably need a little bit less caffeine or more caffeine. I can't tell. These are my video scripts. So when I get ready to do a video, I do like it in an outline form. So that's what I'm reading from you right now. And then when I create a video, I make it a little bit more polished, jump cuts, get rid of all the little ums and the stutters and things like that. But I kind of test the information here. I like to do that. This is just something new I'm doing to give you some information because I know some of you just love lives, and I'm happy to do that. And if I can then turn this clip into a video, then it's a win-win. So I think we're gonna try to do that. But as I was creating this video script, about where the Christian outrage was, I thought, okay, well, someone's gonna ask, well, what about the pro-life stance of MAGA, of white Christian patriarchy? Because, what about the babies? The babies, save the babies. That true. So if they don't care, if they're silent about the victims in the files, what about the pro-life Christians? Where are they talking? How are they reconciling this? So thank you so much for the like and shares. And CJ, thank you for being here. Donna, Jean, thank you. So I want to go over this real quick, and then we'll start to wrap this up, and I'll see if there's any other questions or anything else I can answer. But I thought this was an important kind of postscript to that teaching, so I want to get that out. So, we hear, if you don't know the history of the pro-life stance of evangelical Christians, it really just originated in the 70s. So as early as when Roe v. Wade happened at 73, the Southern Baptist Convention, which it really birthed the moral majority movement. So the moral majority movement was founded by Paul Weyrich and Jerry Falwell. And if you're not, I need to put my pile of books up there. Back there in that pile is a book called Bad Faith by Randall Balmer. And if you've never read that, then you need to read it's easy read, and it will tell you that history. So the moral majority came along basically in response to the civil rights movement, because you had a lot of Christians who were not happy and very much saw the civil rights movement as an affront to their faith. So you look at that contrast of a Baptist like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who was using his faith to create a movement to elevate civil rights, to elevate the human rights and lessen the suffering, the Black community. Then you have this whole other group of people, of white people, that love to dress in white things and go out at night, but hiding their faces, and then we're in the pews on Sunday morning. Out of that came the moral majority movement, and they needed, because historically evangelical Christians were not voters, so they needed something tangible that they could hang on to. And that's how abortion came tied to the moral majority. So as early as 73, when Roe v. Wade is passed, the Southern Baptist Convention made no stance against it. Up until 76, the Southern Baptist Convention said that a woman's right to her decisions about her body was between her and her doctor. The Southern Baptist Convention, y'all. But they figured out a way to trigger an entire movement. And when that's a pattern that then the conservative movement used into the Reagan era, into Mitch McConnell, into the Heritage Foundation, into Project 2025. Find a platform or a theology or a belief that someone can hang their moral hat on, then you can motivate people or scare them to think that we're all going to be overtaken by Sharia law, and you will motivate people through ignorance, through xenophobia, through homophobia. Whatever you can do, you can tie it to that, and you can motivate them to vote. I don't know where I was going with that. Anyway, you got some history. I don't know where I was going with it. I'm getting tired, y'all. Oh, yeah, so the pro-life stance, that's where I was going, because I'm talking about my proscript here. Oh, why they started voting. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you. So you have this pro-life stance that has permeated into today, and obviously that led to Roe v. Wade being overturned, all of the things that have happened to dismantle women's reproductive rights to her reproductive health. So now you have this pro-life movement tied very heavily to this movement that came out of the moral majority, but it's very hypocritical because it has nothing to do with pro-life. It has everything to do with pro-birth. Everything to do with pro-birth, because if it were pro-life, these would be the very people who would not be defunding school lunch programs. They would want kids to have health care. They would want them to have food. They would want them to have safety. They would want them to have shelter. They would want them to have all the things. No, what you want is children born to the most marginalized, to ensure that a classist system always creates an oppressed society that will do the jobs at menial rates, that keeps them below the poverty line. So this is born out of this whole concept is born out of evangelical Christianity. So when someone asks, how can an evangelical Christian who's pro-life be silenced about what's in the files, it's about the reframing of the narrative. Because once a child is born, especially if that child is harmed by a harmful man, that protection or that outrage quietly disappears. Because a truly pro-life ethic would center a child's safety, bodily autonomy, and long-term well-being. Instead, abuse inside churches is minimized. It's delayed. It's reframed. It's even rationalized to protect man in the leadership role. So when this abuse is revealed, the instinct is not how do we protect the child, it's how do we limit damage to the church, the pastor, and the brand. So it's all about reframing. If you can say adultery is moral failure, or sin is about Christians keeping their pro-life self-image alive, then that is the priority, even if the child is harmed. So there is no reconciling. It's about the reframing. It's about the reframing. The reframing will always be about somehow creating a narrative that it's about sin. That's why the language that we use around the files is so important when they talk about the difference between young women versus children. It's very much important that we make sure that we're not using our indoctrinated minds to water or soften down the language that we're finding inside these files. That's our impact on indoctrination. And I didn't even catch at one time that I said it until someone told me I used that that framing, and I didn't even know I had. So pro-birth ideology values potential life over lived life because Christian patriarchy is treated as sacred. That's it. Christian patriarchy is the highest beacon of what should be protected and what is sacred and holy. And when a child's safety conflicts with a man's reputation, the system will always protect the man. Children are used symbolically in pro-life rhetoric, but abandoned practically when they threaten the power structure. So, in their mind, it's not a contradiction. But it absolutely is. So a movement that cannot protect children once they are alive, abused, or somehow inconvenient has forfeited the moral right to claim it is pro-life. They are hypocrites. They are 100% hypocrites. Do not let any of them tell you that they are pro-life. They are pro-birth. Nothing else. Only those of us who are working towards elevating the human condition to relieve pain and suffering that's been caused by systems of oppression have the right to use the title pro-life. We won't use it because of the negative connotations, but we are the ones who deserve to use it. Thank you for the follows. Thank you so much for the lives and the shares. I think we're going to start to wrap this up. Now, the last time we were together, I did a blessing that you all liked, and I've got it pulled up again. Just need to do a few things here so I can see it. Would you like me to do it again? Now, some people may not hate poetic. Some of you may be triggered by the word blessing. Some of you may not want to be a part of this. That's fine. You're free. Hey, Mary Beth, that's my sister. Do you like it every time I say that? That's my sister. You know, as an interfaith, interspiritual minister who's left Christianity, I think it's really sometimes challenging for people to understand that your humanity is still holy. Church didn't define you as sacred. That didn't validate you in any way, shape, or form. You may have been led to believe that your value was determined by your proximity to church, or that you had to be, in order to be a good human, you had to be a good Christian. And that just simply isn't true. I believe that our spirituality is defined by how we show up in the world. When those of us who deconstructed from the patriarchal God no longer need to have the hope of heaven to have a meaningful life. We don't work, our works aren't being counted somewhere up there. I'm not saying don't believe in heaven. I'm not saying I don't even. All I know is I am more content and have more peace not knowing. But because I still believe in something that I can't fully understand, and I believe that right now we lack the human understanding to define it. We haven't evolved to the place of human consciousness yet to completely understand it. That's how religion gets it short. And when it becomes very dogmatic and says, no, this is what you have to believe and this is what you have to do, that's when we start to lose our way. So I'd rather be here in this big, open, expansive space of not knowing with you than pretending like I have the answers. And that's not comfortable for some people. But for me, I have peace in it. So it's from that space that I offer this blessing because you deserve it. Religion never made you good. Your label as a Christian or as whatever your denomination was, whatever your belief system was, that wasn't what made you a good person. We have the right here to be in this space, creating something sacred and meaningful. This is how we turn our rage into activism. But yet we still have the right to come together and pause for breath and meaning and say that our being here today is just as sacred and holy as anybody who spent an hour and a half in church on Sunday. Welcome to our church, if you will. So I hope today was wonderful. I hope that somehow you found validation in your anger, but you also found a reason to keep going and keep believing and keep hoping. Hope is actionable. And so if we believe that things get better, like the arc of the moral universe can be bent, as it has been in the past, by leaders and visionaries far more than what we have in this moment, then we too can put our hands on that and pull it towards justice, pull it towards kindness. I believe that. And I believe that's our moment. We are not going to be paralyzed by fear. Because I'm telling you, there are so many more of us than there are of them. And they are terrified that we actually are finding each other, that we actually are coming together for a time such as this. So, with that, let me say this blessing to you. You can take a deep breath. And here we go. May your deconstructing journey help you heal from Christian patriarchy. May your spirituality anchor you when the world feels unmoored, reminding you that your humanity is sacred and worth defending. May you be protected from systems that seek to silence, shame, or erase you. And may your spirit learn to recognize danger without being consumed by fear. May your anger sharpen into clarity, not cruelty, and may it move you towards justice rather than despair. May you remember that resistance is not separate from love, and that care for the vulnerable is a holy act. May you find strength in community, knowing you were never meant to survive this moment alone. May you rest when you need to, rise when it is time, and trust your own discernment about when to do each. May your life itself become a quiet refusal to comply with dehumanization, domination, and harm. May you be brave enough to stay soft in a world that rewards hardness and wise enough to guard your tenderness fiercely. May you know that choosing goodness in dark times is an act of sacred defiance. May you reclaim your spirituality and define it in ways that is sacred to you and that honors your life's journey. May you invite only those into your inner circle who love you so unconditionally that they celebrate without limit and that they guard your heart. May you turn back to your life as a better version of yourself, walking fully in your authenticity. I'm believing that for you. I'm believing that for us. And so it is. It has been an honor to be in this space with you. I know you have many ways to spend your time, and you chose it to be here. I'm grateful. Thank you all. Bye for now.